podcast is powered by PKF. PKF, your trusted advisor in the Hunter for over 45 years. Down to Business acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters this podcast is recorded on.
Welcome, thanks for joining me for another edition of Down to Business. And today we're talking about a very much misunderstood topic of IT, information technology, whatever you want to call it in your business, but so prevalent these days for, I think, nearly every business. So I thought we'd get along Rob Buck from Diamond IT, tell us a bit about what they do, how they work with business owners, and give some takeaways for business owners that need to look at within their own business and how they can benefit from technology and also protect themselves in other circumstances. So welcome, Rob. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Andy.
Maybe over to you to talk a bit about yourself and what you do and your team, etc.
I'm the Managing Director of Diamond IT. So we've been running since 1996. So I like to tell people I was about 6 or 7 when I started it, but it's been a while. So I've seen a lot in IT.
Fair bit of change.
Huge amounts of change over that time. So I guess obviously these days I'm a little bit disconnected from the tech, so I get a bit embarrassed sometimes when I'm talking to some of my techies. I get a little bit out of touch with it. But
it's funny, just sorry on that point, but I know in my games, I'm in accounting, but I talked to some of our younger staff about what a cash book is.
Yeah.
Would not have a clue, let alone they think everything's in a computer. And the other one that always comes up is that internet used to be a dial-up.
Yeah. Well, I've seen all that, and I've seen the cash books and double entry accounting as well. And it's funny because I probably a bit like you, I held on to the idea of double entry accounting for a while, but I think now it's got to let it go. Yeah.
All right, so I mean, as I said at the start, technology is such a big part of, as I said, any business these days, and from all different angles. What do you find? How does your business work with business owners, and what are some of the common things that are becoming more prevalent day in, day out?
So I guess for us, it depends on the size of the organisation. So sometimes we're working with business owners, and other times we're working with IT managers. So the conversations are different. Obviously, with business owners, it tends to be more business orientated. They're talking more about their objectives, where they're going, and more the IT staff tends to be more technical. But either way, the key is to really understand the customer and their industry and what they're trying to achieve. I think a lot of people are concerned about cyber, which we'll probably talk about. Generally, it's either just keeping things reliable, keeping the bad guys out, and getting a bit of benefit from technology and automation and things like that.
And customer facing and efficiencies and that sort of thing.
Yeah, customer experience stuff as well.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, you touched on a point there, the different, stakeholders that you work with depending on the business.
Yeah.
So you work with internal teams and also, I guess, be the internal team in some instances.
Yeah. So I guess if you're looking at the difference between internal and external IT, we work with both, with customers that both get us to do everything, and then others that have got internal IT. And there's definitely a place for both. For our part, being an external provider, I guess what we provide is, at the smaller end, it's certainly either economically impossible or difficult to justify a smaller business having a full-time IT resource or an IT resource team. So most of those businesses will use an external provider like us. As they get bigger, what I found is that there's no rhyme or reason to it. We've worked with organisations with over 1,000 staff, and we've done absolutely everything. There seems to be a bit of personal preference, I think, between them wanting full control and having that team and just completely running it, and then another school of thought's really, look, we're not IT people, we want to focus on what we do. So as an external provider, you're just filling the gaps in that situation. They might have a knowledge gap, or they might have a gap in resourcing. Probably one thing that I've noticed with internal setups, even though they might have great techs, really good team, sometimes they miss out on some of the technology aspects like management systems, which help with monitoring and making sure we keep the bad guys out. They don't have that technology, so that can be a bit of a weakness sometimes.
So is there an optimal model?
I honestly think it's horses for courses, and as I said, I've seen organisations with over 1,000 staff fully outsource, and I've seen organisations with under 20 have internal IT, and I honestly think it's based on the person, and some people, I think they just want that more control. They want everything in-house.
Yeah.
And then others, they just want to focus on what they do. So it's really, I've found it's personal preference. It's not, there's no logical optimal model, but I think at about 100 staff, people are going to be starting to think about it.
So talk to me then, if you're saying it's about their goals and about understanding what they're trying to achieve. I imagine this isn't done all that often for smaller business, but you enter a business, probably because you're good at whatever it is you do, whether it be the plumber or run a cafe or whatever it may be, or even a bigger business. What do you see all too often are the mistakes people make with regard to technology? Because I imagine a lot of it's reactive. They've been told by someone they've got to do something as opposed to having a plan.
I think the mistake, it's probably not a specific thing, but more a broad thing, as that is, I think people aren't catching up with the fact that IT is doing a lot more than it used to do. So for a long time, the focus was really just reliability and things working, and I remember showing people computers that could keep up with the speed of typing, So that's a while back now, but what I'm finding is that I think 10 years ago, IT wasn't really delivering, and I don't think it was able to give the benefits people really were after, or it'd be really expensive to get those benefits. I think it's kind of flipped over now, and there's just so much coming, there's so much technology coming. People own technology they don't even actually use, and they could be getting benefit from it. So I think there's been a transition, and so not so much a mistake, but I think it's more of an awareness. I just don't think they're seeing what can be done. We're going to businesses and automating processes for them.
So saving on labour.
Yeah, saving a lot. And look, to me, the place for automation is one of two things. One thing is a mundane task no one wants to do and it's hard to get people to do. And on the other side is a really complex task that is just, really hard for anyone to get their head around.
Give me an example of one.
So, I'm on the board of Samaritan. So, in that organisation, incident management, in terms of whether there's been an accident or something of that nature, is a very complex process. We're talking about manuals this thick with highly complex processes, very difficult for anyone to get head around. So to be able to automate a process like that, so if there's an incident, the system's going to ask a series of questions, and based on those answers, it'll take it through different, what they call workflows. Depending on the severity of the incident, it'll notify the CEO or ensure that the police are notified. There's a lot of complexity to that. So that's the sort of thing that you can heavily automate and take a lot of the human error out of.
And then there's other things like, one of our previous topics we've covered is marketing and that social media side, using technology for that advantage, I guess, and controlling it for that matter, so you don't get necessarily the reputational negative effects of it. And things like accounting, from a point of view of whether it be collecting debtors or even automating your creditor process. So a fair bit of opportunity for business owners to make genuine cost savings through the use of technology.
I think when you mention accounting, I personally, we've sold accounting systems in the past, and I've got a pretty decent understanding of it. I think accounting systems have done a pretty decent job for a long time. What's happening now is people can integrate other systems to their accounting systems, and I think that's one of those things they don't really know they can do. So, only in the last couple of weeks I was talking to one of our customers in the aged care sector, and they were really quite surprised to know they could integrate these systems because they're dealing with different silos of information. So that's where I think tech's starting to catch up. If you've got a really old accounting system, you maybe can't get in and get at the data, but most systems these days...
So is that what they talk about then, the cloud?
So...
The cloud, what is it?
Cloud's kind of a different thing, but I think it's still a buzzword. It's been a buzzword for a few years now, but I think probably the best way to explain, or I think maybe the easiest way to explain a cloud is to compare it to how things have traditionally worked. And that is, let's say you've got one site and you've got, say, 30 computers and you've got a couple of servers over in the corner. In the what we call on-prem environment,
on-prem, you mean?
On-prem is short for on-premise is the industry term, which is apparently a legal term, so it should be on-premises, but we call it on-premise. So in that environment, the organisation is entirely responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that server environment.
Yep.
Whether they use someone like us or whether they do it internally, they're completely responsible for it. So I guess probably the simplest way to explain cloud is that computing resource is housed and maintained and owned by someone completely separate in a different environment. So you just access it as you need it. In terms of advantages, I think probably a few. The first one is we're working in so much more of a mobile world now. So cloud environments they're better handling the mobile environment to be able to work anywhere. You're actually, sharing in some really high-tech infrastructure. So most cloud environments, the servers would be right at the top of the food chain in terms of what sort of capability. You're in a data center environment, which is environmentally controlled. So you're actually accessing something that most small business would never be able to afford. They're not going to spend seven figures on their own data center. And the third thing is the being able to pay for what you need when you need it. That's something that I think is really great about cloud, is that for many years we've had the server refresh investment decisions. You've probably seen that a few times yourself. And every 3 or 4 years.
And they're big spends. Yeah.
Big spend, capital outlay. But the other thing, you've got to plan for what's going to happen over the next 3 or 4 years. So you've basically got to build that contingency into that server to make sure it's designed to handle possibly a higher level of growth that might actually occur. I was in a room with a well-known small business recently, and what was happening was we're having that server refresh decision and we're planning out the next few years, but we're talking about a cloud environment, and the owner was saying, look, our main business application is going to go to the cloud, and when that happens, I'm not going to need as much server. And I'm like, you're right, but it doesn't matter with cloud, because you're going to have this much server today, and in 2 months' time or 12 months' time, if that backs off, all we do is shut down those servers, and you get billed less. And it was almost such a foreign concept. It took him a sort of bit to get his head around it, and eventually he's like, oh, okay, I get it.
It's more a user pays.
Yeah, at the time what you need, so it scales up or down depending on what you need. So 6 months afterwards, that software package did go into the cloud. He needed 30% less server resource. He's now getting charged 30% less. So in the on-prem world, he would have been locked into that level of expenditure.
Yeah, sure.
But that's probably the key thing from a financial point of view, that ability to scale up and down. Even scaling up for a couple of months, if there's some reason why you just need this extra resource for a while, you can do that as well.
So, for, I guess, both growing businesses and probably more mature and declining businesses or business working towards an exit, not a bad option from a scalability point of view.
And again, it's about that planning, and you'd see it every day working with small businesses. They don't necessarily know exactly where they're going to be in 3 or 4 years, and so they don't have to plan for that contingency.
So I think that's coming through pretty loud and clear that one of the traps and one of maybe the tips for business in general, but small business owners, is to actually have a plan around technology, where that was probably pretty foreign before. It was just, we have what we have, and now there's so many different applications and so many different ways you can use technology. Is to engage with people and getting some advice before you even think about rolling out. Yeah, so one of our 4 product pillars is technology consulting. So we'll go in as an external resource, and there's a number of different areas we can help. We do it as cyber consulting, and we do disaster recovery, but one of them is IT strategy. And look, you're probably not going to do that if you've got 6 or 7 people, but as the organisation grows, it becomes really important to connect what's happening with technology to the business strategy. So our guys will come in, understand where things are going, and then help, say, provide a 3-year IT plan. And also software selection. This is really, the tech part of it's very complicated, but even the decision, let's say you're looking at buying a new accounting system, most people look at that accounting system and look at the functionality of it and sort of figure out if that meets their needs, but often they won't look at the
the actual financial backing of the organisation that's providing that solution.
Yeah, right.
And that's a big part of it, because, okay, I might do a great job today. What about 5 years' time? What about 10 years' time? I'm sure you've seen customers who are locked into systems. And I think you've got to broaden it out past that and look at the actual technology underneath. Like, the average customer's not going to have the skills to be able to decide whether the actual technology inside that system's in high tech and is going to connect to other systems and things like that.
And will actually deliver on what their objectives are.
Yeah, and look, I think that's the key, and then it might not be just about the accounting system. Maybe the best thing is to widen out that footprint and have an accounting system that's also crossing over and doing some other things like CRM, or at least connecting to CRM. So they're the sorts of things where you can sort of sit back from it and come up with a plan that fits in with where you're going to go as an organisation.
Okay. So the cloud, I'm gathering, is using the internet, yeah?
Yeah.
So there's so much data and so much information being put out, and people are putting more and more each day, as we know.
Yeah.
How's that kept private? And, from a business owner's point of view, what's their responsibility and why should they care?
They definitely should care. They should care anyway, but these days, with changes in legislation, they should care even more.
So they have to.
Yeah. Well, look, cybersecurity is the biggest technology risk, and I think it's actually independent of technology. I think it's one of the bigger risks most businesses face at the moment. And the risks can be financial, legal, and reputational. So, if you get breached, you could potentially have to pay what they call a ransom to someone on the other side of the world. You've got downtime. They're very direct financial risks. Legal risks, what's happening is, because of some pretty high-profile privacy breaches, governments around the world have clamped down. So Australia, you've got notifiable data breach, and in Europe, GDPR. So these are laws now where if an organisation has a breach and customer information has been sent overseas, or has been compromised in some way, the government's basically going to come in and look at how you handled the situation, and you can be up for some pretty significant fines. I believe the limit, and it would have to be a pretty bad situation, but the limit's, I think, 420,000 for an individual and 2.1 million for an organisation.
Yeah, right.
So why should they care? There's some pretty big reasons there. But it's also that reputation. If you're an organisation that's got a customer base and your reputation is valuable to you, and that's the case of obviously most organisations, that's going to be a pretty big trust factor that if you've had a breach.
Okay, so the message is you need to do something about cybersecurity, and can't just be flippant about when. Yeah,
and look, people need to understand it's not just a technology issue. So the tech is getting better. I would say the tech's doing a better job at keeping the bad guys out than it did 2 years ago. Some pretty interesting stuff, and I won't get too techie here, but I think it's pretty interesting. There's this concept called sandboxing now, where this threat enters the network and the device actually recognises that could possibly be some sort of cyber attack. And what it does is it puts us into this, what they call a sandbox environment, which is it's basically this isolated little computer environment, and runs it and sees what happens. And if it is a threat, it just won't let it through.
Yeah, right.
So there's some interesting stuff like that, but people have got to understand they're only fighting with one hand tied behind their back if they focus purely on the technology. You've also got to look at your policy, staff awareness training. Over half of the cyber attacks are actually initiated by accident by people, their own employees inside the organisation. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got, let's say you've had a breach, you've got the Privacy Commission knocking on your door. You need to be able to show, okay, these are my policies around this. You also should have, this is the sort of thing I think comes from an afterthought for a lot of people, is incident management plan. So, okay, we've had a breach. What's going to be the communication to the customer base? How are we going to get that out to the customer base? How am I going to present my approach? And have I had independent view based on what I'm doing around cybersecurity? you're going to be in a lot better position with the government if you're able to show all those things.
Yeah, and I guess there's so many ways, as I said, with how we're using technology and especially online.
Yep.
There's so many ways to actually have an attack or be prone to some of this sort of stuff.
I think there was some pretty high profile cases maybe over the last 2 years, but not as many this year. And I think I'm seeing that people aren't quite as onto it as they were maybe last year, where people were just basically coming to us and saying, what do I need to do? So often it'll be the biggest issue will be what gets the attention. I think cyber's kind of, people aren't seeing as much of it, but it's equally as important. And I think another thing people need to understand is, the hacker used to be this sort of almost, the quintessential person, the hoodie in the dark room. And these guys in the past would basically try to crack into networks as a sport. They weren't actually trying to cause any damage. They wanted to see if they could get in, and they put a smiley face on people's screens and things like that. Now you've got really well-run organisations that, this is amazing buildings though. I don't think it'll look quite like this, but look like a professional organisation with a HR department, marketing departments. They're actually advertising their services on the web. It's basically, right. It's not just someone that's typing away. So they're very targeted. And the other thing is, I think people might feel like, okay, why are they going to attack me? And it's not that they decide to go and get ABC Bakery. It's what they're doing is they've got these bots that are going around. They're basically digitally knocking on doors, and when there's something that's vulnerable, they're in. And at that point, they'll,
as you said, hold your business to ransom or do some damage, whether it be trading or reputational. So, okay. So I guess that's the dark side, the negative side, I guess, and what we need to protect. I mean, with all this data and use of technology, there have to be, a myriad of ways that business owners can actually use the data for good. What are you seeing in that space?
I think it's a pretty exciting space. So in our industry, we use the term business intelligence, or BI. Only maybe 5 years ago, if someone came to us and said, we want to set up these dashboards and we want to get this information from these systems over here and here, it was really expensive to approach. So typically they would have to go out and buy...
Hang on, what's a dashboard?
A dashboard's basically all information on one screen. So if let's say that you're a sales manager and you wanted to look at what's happening, at the 5 or 6 things that matter to you most, would be all on the one screen. Okay. So like pie chart here and charts over here.
Hence why it was expensive?
Well, no, it was expensive because the tech just hadn't caught up. So they'd have to go out and buy, 3 or 4 servers, and that was just to get on starting blocks, and then they'd have to spend the money on that. Now with cloud, again, all that resource is taken care of by someone else. And using a Microsoft platform, we just did a sales dashboard for a manufacturing business. It was like 5 or 6K, but that was probably $100,000 10 years ago. So they're not going to do it, but then they're flying blind on all that information that they like that access to.
So dashboards is one way. What else we can use that data for?
So I think that most organisations I've seen in their financial systems have got pretty good reporting and information around all their financial data, but it's the non-financial data, the things that actions you take, potentially in a sales team to make things happen, or your service team, what's happening with customer satisfaction. That's the side that I think most people don't have as much information as they should, and that's where the financial data is going to give you that rear vision mirror stuff, the lag indicators.
The other drivers.
Yeah, whereas the lead indicators are the things that you keep on top of, where your salespeople are or your service people are, to make sure they're doing a great job for customers. That's the information people don't typically have in their faces, and up until this point, it's been prohibitively expensive to get at it. It's now a bit easier to get at.
So with the rate of change, I mean, not only is there more technology options, but it's just becoming cheaper and cheaper.
Yep, most stuff is becoming cheaper, yeah. And I think internet pipes are something people need to consider.
What's an internet pipe?
Well, just access to the internet.
Okay.
So,
Speed.
it wasn't all that long ago. Look, if an email didn't come through that quickly or something, it's not really a problem. Or if the internet went down for a little while, it wasn't the end of the world. But now people's entire businesses are based on what's happening with their internet connection. So that's probably an area I think people need to spend a bit more than they did in the past.
And I think with all of this, and being from a business that uses technology a hell of a lot, the challenge is always how do you keep that human side involved and not communicating with each other just by email or communicating with customers, as you said, online. Are there any tips around that sort of stuff?
So we don't personally focus on internet marketing, but we use it. We use social media. We use a platform called HubSpot, which is a digital marketing platform. And again, it's amazing what you can see. Almost a bit scary, to be honest, what you can see about where people are going inside a website, and you can set up processes to say, well, if they've gone and looked at that product and that product and that product, they might be interested in this product, and send information about it and automate all those things.
You're using that to gather info, to feed to your people, so they can then have better conversations, can actually talk to people, etc.
Yeah, and it can be automated as well. So, you might be able to send a bit of information on this product over here automatically. Also, I think a lot of businesses would be taking advantage of things like Google Analytics to see how their digital marketing pipelines are working and how many people are accessing their site and subscribers and things of that nature.
Yeah, okay.
So in digital marketing now, you've got your outbound branch, which is what you're trying to make effort and salespeople making calls, and then your inbound is people coming into websites and subscribing to YouTube channels and things of that nature. So there's a lot of information that these systems can provide to give you a chance to maybe improve some of those parameters to increase the chance of success.
Okay, all right. So, as I said, there's so much technology around. My belief is that all businesses, even I've seen in agricultural, all businesses having technology needs. Would you agree with that, or are you saying are there any businesses not affected by technology?
I don't think there would be, because you have to interact with a bank or government or something at some point. But I have to say, I've got a mate who owns a cattle farm at Blaney, and having visited with him, and as if you know anyone who's got a farm, when you visit a farmer, you become a farmer for a while and actually help out. And
city farmer.
Yeah, that's it. And help dredge cattle and all that sort of stuff. I know for him, technology is a very small part about what he does. And so be it. I personally don't care if there's businesses that have zero reliance on it. But I think the key is that there's a very high level of reliance for most businesses. And as I've sort of said during our talk, I think what technology can deliver now compared to what it could do 10 years, 20 years ago is night and day.
And the rate of change, what it can deliver in the next 5 to 10 years
is
just
incredible.
I'd have to
It's
agree.
almost fatiguing for us to keep up with it.
And
It's
so on that point, what are some of the things you're seeing? What's some of the secret stuff the IT world see? What can businesses expect, or what should they be looking out for that can help them?
Well, look, I think a lot of people have got Microsoft's Office 365, so they have access to a lot of systems that they might not know they've got, or they might not be, just simply be using. And look, SharePoint's been around for a long time, but that's a way of people keeping their documents in a more structured manner. What's starting to happen now with that environment is something called Teams, which is really a collaboration tool. So you can pull together what we call a team, and they might be, a certain group of people inside your organisation might be interested in a particular project, and you add them to that team, and they can all work on it collaboratively. Another thing that's sort of the new buzz term, and it'll start to happen more and more, is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence obviously is about the system pretty much thinking almost like a human, to be able to figure out things on its own.
Yeah, I've watched the YouTube videos on that IBM Watson.
Yeah.
That's pretty, if you haven't seen it, You go and Google it, it's pretty scary what it can do.
There's big organisations using it right now. So I was at there's an industry research organisation called Gartner. I was at a Gartner conference last year, and a fairly well-known resources business was there as a customer talking about their experience, and they were using AI in 14 different parts of their business.
Yeah, right.
And it's pretty exciting stuff. So that's coming. I'd say just that collaboration, the computer system starting to preempt things. This is something that I think you might want to do. It's getting more accurate at it.
And it's changing so many different industries, whether it be that affect business owners, whether it be from banking or HR or how people work, etc. So it can't be ignored.
Yeah, and look, I was wanting my phone to read an email to me recently, and I had a bit of trouble getting it to happen. I was getting a bit cranky about that, but 2 years ago I would never thought to ask my phone to read me an email. So I think it's just this incredible pace of change, and it's getting better at it too. I mean, I've been in this industry for 25 years and 30 years if you include my time studying. And I've just felt like, okay, it's just not where it needs to be, but it is truly delivering more and more now.
Okay, no, it's good to hear.
Yeah.
So I guess what we're getting at that, there's a massive use of technology, and we know that in business, it's how you use it to get the advantages and probably cover off on the downside risk, and that's not just from a cyberspace, but also how people use it, still keeping that human element involved.
Yeah.
I guess just to start to wrap this up, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong what I've heard, but really is any good approach to technology needs a plan. Yeah, understand what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, who your customers are, etc. And within that plan, review what you have and what you don't have and what you may need.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then I guess from there, it's working with, whether it be someone like yourselves or an internal team or a combination of both, people that know what they're talking about and can link what you're trying to achieve to the tech side in that layman sort of approach to make sure you realise those goals. That'd be fair to say.
Yeah, and I think it's great advice, because that's what I'm not seeing in the market. Most people are trying to get something to be a little bit more reliable, or they want this to be a bit faster, but a lot of the conversations aren't initiated by, hey, this is what we're trying to do in our business. And that's what the technology should be there for.
Yeah, and I think that's a common theme with all the videos we've done so far. Everyone has said, well, it's about having a plan. It's about being proactive up front before you go and spend all your hard earned and maybe not get the result you want. So it's a good theme that's coming through. I guess second that you mentioned about you have to do something with cybersecurity and protecting customers' data. Yep. Wherever
again, both the technology and the human element.
Yep. And wherever possible, look at that cloud option because it's scalable. Whether you're growing or you're declining, or whether you're just staying still, and it will legitimately save money within your business.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. They need to trust their provider to ensure they're not getting pushed towards the cloud. There's specific situations where customers, normally around what sort of information they need to send over the internet or how much information would be better with an on-premise situation. So they need to trust their provider to get the right advice on that.
And the final couple of points I guess I picked out was with that technology and that online environment, look at all the function across your business and seek advice as to how you can use that technology to save on labour, to be more efficient, to give a better customer experience, whatever it may be. And it's getting cheaper.
Absolutely. I think, as you know, advising people, I think when things get sort of buried in the HR part of the P&L, and it's been the same expense every month. They don't necessarily look for places they could save, and automation can certainly help. And what I've found is I haven't found defensiveness from staff. Usually when you automate a really mundane process, they love it.
We've found from ourselves, it's given us the ability to scale up the business without being hamstrung by not being able to get skilled labour, because what you've been able to free up, you can redeploy, you can give people more opportunity, and as you said, taking away some of that mundane sort of task. And I'd agree, it's been quite well received. And I guess that final point that you raised was, with all that data, you can actually start to use it for your advantage on predicting trends and using business intelligence within your business the dashboards, and this sort of thing to help drive results and get a better result.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers, and just probably to reinforce the point that talk to your provider about what sort of tech is out there now, because I think there's a lot more happening and a lot more available that people just aren't aware of at the moment.
Or get multiple opinions.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, thanks for talking to us about all things IT. I know that's my little tip that I usually give myself is turn it off and turn it back on and see if that works. But I'm sure there's more to that.
Still works.
Mate, thanks for joining us.
No worries.
And,
Thanks, mate.
cheers.
No worries. Thank you.